Hi, it's Andy with Nummech Products. Today we're going over the installation of the Mini-GS VLX frame, the X standing for extended because it has built-in foregrip extender. Now, for all the frames we've made and all the stuff we've done in the past, this is probably one of the most involved installations out of everything else, so you got to be patient because this is going to take some time, but I'm just going to get right into it. But the first thing to do is to remove all of the grips, including the foregrips and the grip frame itself. You have a lot of these little button cap screws to remove, so I'm just going to get started. Remember to save all these screws, you will need them later. Grips come off, pull those aside, and now take off the foregrip. Alright, so now the foregrip just slides off and you can pop out the battery like that. So what you have to do here is basically remove the frame from the marker body, take off the regulator, and all that is going to go onto the new frame. So to do that, I'm going to start by taking the foregrip to break it free from the frame itself. To do that, you have to remove these two flathead screws that are located toward the top of the frame, right under the detents. Save these screws, as again, you will need them later. Now, there's two screws located in the front of the plastic frame, and then one at the top. All of these have to be removed in order to go further. So, I'm going to take these out right now. I'm going to pull all of these foregrip screws together because they'll all be reused. Now I'm just going to slide off the plastic foregrip gently and unplug it from the circuit board by grabbing the connector and pulling it off. Don't just grab the wires because then you might damage the connector. So save the foregrip for later. You'll have to reinstall it in a little bit. Okay, at this point you have to take the frame off from the marker body. To do that, there's two screws holding it on, one here and one in front of the trigger. When you take out the rear screw, you have to be careful because the firing assembly is held in with a spring and it might pop out at you. That's why I'm holding onto it with my pinky. So when I take this screw out, I'm going to also remove the firing assembly just to make sure it doesn't come popping out in my face later. So there it is. Set that aside. The bolt's still inside the gun. I guess I'll leave it there. Now there's this one screw left, located in the front. So I'm going to pop that free. And I'm going to set both these frame screws over here. Now to take the frame from the body, you have to gently slide it up, being very careful not to damage the little connector on the circuit board because that's a fragile component and can't help you if you have damaged that. So very gently pull the solenoid out from the body, or sorry, out from the frame, and you can see there's the two parts. So I'm going to take the body and set it aside because you don't need anything there, at least not for the time being. On the grip frame itself, you basically have to take everything out except for the tube. So you have to take the trigger out, the circuit board, the little button pad, and the regulator. I'm just going to start with the front of the gun here at the circuit board by removing this screw, and it should pop the board free. Gently take that off and set that down. There's a loose screw. You won't need this one, but it's the same size as the grip screw, so I'm going to put it over there with the other grip screws. Now located in the front, there's a little flathead screw that holds in the button pad. I'm going to take that out. Find some place to put all this stuff. And you can pop the pad out. I'm going to keep that screw along with it because you will need that. To get the trigger out, you'll have to push it from one side. You'll see that one side of the pin is slightly knurled with some little lines on it. You have to push it out from the opposite side. You might need to take a hammer and a punch and very gently tap it out. Sometimes you don't have to do that, but sometimes you do. So here's the trigger. and the trigger pin. I'm going to slide those together just to keep them from falling apart. Now on the stock frame, the only thing left to take apart is the regulator. So for that, take Allen key and loosen the cap screw that's located in the top, and you'll just coerce that out. You can see it just fell out. And now located here in the back side of the frame, still from the inside, just toward the back, there's a little set screw. That's the only thing that's really holding the regulator in position when you remove the screw. So I loosen the set screw and it should be able to fall out just like that. There's the screw, sorry, the set screw. And now when you loosen the lower air chamber, you'll be able to get the regulator off just by sliding it forward. And you can see the O-ring came out and it got kind of shredded, I think. So that's probably no longer going to be useful, but I'm going to hold on to it. So at this point, you basically have a completely disassembled Mini-GS. The only thing you don't need here is a frame, so I'm going to put that over here and probably never see it again. Alright, so taking a look at the Nummech frame, you basically have all the screws pre-installed. They come with a new set of grip panel screws that are black in color just because they look better. And there's a screw for the circuit board that's taped into position. That's what this yellow tape is for. So I'm going to take that off right now, but you can't lose that screw because that's one of the differences between the stock part and the Nummech frame. So the Nummech frame uses this longer length screw to hold the board in position. So I'm going to thread that into position on the board just so I don't lose it. And the original screw that was used for the board, I think I threw into that pile. We don't need that anymore, so we'll just keep it there. At this point, you're basically ready to reinstall everything. I'm just going to follow reverse order from the way I went to get here, starting with the regulator, because this is probably the most complicated part. You can see that we've done some changes here. One of the biggest things is that we've installed a small little air coupling in the bottom. You can see that's a little red component that's barely visible. What that is it's a screw actuated air fitting where you insert a 5/32 Allen key into the top, and you can use this to tighten it down and screw it down into the regulator. So what you want to do is take the reg and drop your O-ring back inside of, not the regulator, but actually the frame. You want this to sit right on top of that little red air coupling. So I'm just going to push it down gently with a little Allen key. Now, keeping the frame upside down like this, take your stock regulator and slide it on, and it should just go right on. If you encounter resistance, it probably means that that air coupling is pushed down too far. So then take your Allen key, stick it into the top, and unscrew it to drive the air coupling towards the top of the frame. So with the regulator in position like that, you now have to take the small bag of hardware that comes with the frame. These are slightly longer screws compared to the ones that the stock hardware uses. So I'm going to take those screws and throw them over here. Your new screws, like I said, they're longer because the frame is a little bit beefier down here at the bottom. So take those out from the bag. You've got a cap screw in this hand and a little set screw in this hand. The cap screw goes through that exposed hole that has a flat on it. So you have to work it into position. It takes a little bit of patience because there's not a lot of space down here at the bottom of the frame. But once it's in position, you're free to tighten it using your Allen keys. And you can see how easy this procedure is with ball-rounded Allen keys. I just have to guide it in. And now take that new set screw and drop it in through that front hole, and it's going to go all the way down to the bottom of the frame. And take your Allen keys again and just tighten that a little bit. The screw that actually holds the regulator in position is the cap screw. Set screw just keeps it from wiggling. So as long as you now have these components tight, you can take your 5/32 Allen key and insert it through the top down into the little set screw that you can see and tighten that down. You'll feel it get kind of squishy as you tighten it. That's because you're pushing down on that little O-ring until it collapses into the groove. But I say go hand tight, and once it's tight enough, that probably means it's ready to seal up. So there's the regulator installed and ready to go. Next, I'm going to install the trigger. Pretty easy to do. All you have to do is just slide it up into the groove and then reinstall your trigger pin. Take note that there's a magnet installed in the VL frame right here. The small screws on the side are holding a little plastic component that you can see from the front, and that's what's holding this magnet in position. What you want is exactly this, where the magnets repel each other. And so just by happenstance, if your magnet is flipped around, or if the trigger magnet is flipped around, then they might attract each other and it'll be pulling the trigger shut. You don't want that to happen because that means you're just firing a gun all the time. So you'd have to take out the small set screws and loosen the little plastic piece, flip the magnet around, put it back in. But that's built-in functionality. You should be able to do that on your own. Also keep in mind that you can move the position of the magnet inside the frame just by loosening these screws and moving the magnet around. So you have the option of adjusting the magnet on the trigger or the magnet on the frame, or both. So whatever you want to do to get the exact right trigger pull that you desire, that's, you've got a lot of options to do it. I'm just going to leave things how it is for the purposes of this. I'm not going to take anything out. Next step, reinstall the little rubber membrane pad here in the front. So all you have to do is just push it into position within the frame like that. And you should have a little flathead screw that gets inserted through the front, like so. And there we go. Just tighten that hand tight. You don't have to go crazy with it. You're just going to squish the rubber if you go too tight. Alright, we're getting down to the end. The next step is to reinstall the main board, as you can see in my hand. Now this is where you got to be careful because the little connector here in the top is pretty fragile and you don't want to break it. So if you turn your attention to the frame, you can see this big part sticking out the front. This is what actually covers up the circuit board. The circuit board allows you to have that extended aspect. So I'm going to loosen it, but not take it off. Well, actually, let's just take it off. It'll make it easier to see. If you take this board cover off completely, don't lose the little screw. You can see how the extender works. You basically have a little connector that just plugs into the board, just like that. So I'm going to position the circuit board into place inside of the rubber pad in the front, because there's a little hole for the LED and there's a little hole for the little input button. So just by pushing it down in place, this is where it belongs. Now you can gently guide the circuit board down into the connector like this. It should just slop right in there. There we go. Now everything's probably going to stay together like that, but I recommend you reinstall the circuit board cover just to keep parts from falling out. Just hand tight, that's all you need. And now that new screw, it's about a 1/2 inch long, that'll be inserted through this back groove, and that will drive into the back side of the main board, keep it from wiggling around. For this you need a 7/64 Allen key. So just go like that, and there it is. So you now have your board installed, and everything else is pretty much good to go. I guess the next step is the foregrip, plastic foregrip housing I should say. So for this you have to reinstall that connector right into the main board. So gently reinsert the two. Be careful not to damage the wires because they can't take too much punishment. So with the board connector installed, just slide that plastic housing into place. And it might be kind of tight because of the way that the foregrip is machined, but it should just slide around it just like that. And now you're ready to reinstall these screws here, which are used to hold the foregrip in place. Oops. Here we go. So I'm just going to start the threads on all these screws I don't want to tighten them down fully because that prevents the foregrip from moving around for the other screws to become installed in their positions. You got 3 from the front, 2 are located at the bottom. I'm going to drop those in, and then 1's located here in the top. Alright, so now put the battery back in, negative and negative, like this. Foregrip cover goes like that. Take some of these screws and reinstall. Screws for the foregrip cover and screws for the grips themselves, they're all the same. They're just 1/4 inch length screws, so you can mix them up. Alright, so what you see right now is the frame basically ready to go onto the body. The only thing I want to do before I get to that is remove these new black screws that are located in the spots for the grip panel screws. The screws are a little bit shorter than the stock ones, but the main thing is that they're black. It makes it look a little bit better. I'm going to take them off just to make sure they don't gouge anything. So with the marker body in this hand and the frame in this hand, you can gently push the two back together. But you got to be careful because you don't want to pinch any of these wires located here. You don't want to pinch the O-ring located here, and you also have to guide in the connector that's located at the front. So you got to be kind of coordinated. A lot of this stuff has to come together at once. But it should just basically glide in like that. Just like that. And now I'm going to reinstall the 2 screws that hold the frame onto the body. This one in the front is easier. Earlier I took out the firing assembly located here, so I'm going to reinsert that, making sure the bolt's already in the gun. And you'll have to hold it forward with one hand while you reinstall the screw with the other hand. Like this. It's really coming together now. Very last thing, reinstall the grips. And I'm going to use these new screws because they look nice. And here's the last screw. So that's it. Now I'm going to turn on the marker and pressurize it so I can test the air connection down here. So I got a battery and you can hear it's clicking. I'm going to install my tank and pressurize it up. Now, if you hear any leaks, it probably means that the O-ring that's located down here in the regulator, maybe it got damaged when you removed it. So you might have to put a new one on there, grease it up. Going to increase the pressure here a little bit. Yeah. Now, I should mention that you may have to perform some adjustments to your dwell setting on your circuit board because the frame uses a slightly different sized air chamber compared to the stock parts. So you'll probably have to go back to the drawing board and experiment with different dwell settings, different air pressure, get it to the point where it's actually firing good. With some markers, you don't have to perform any adjustments at all, but with others, you have to either increase the dwell or decrease the pressure or do something like that. And also keep in mind you've got your velocity adjustment in the back. Some people say adjust your velocity with the pressure. Other people say do it with the back. Empire suggests that you do it through the back. And I tend to agree, but I say whatever works for you. If you get it firing good, then go with it. But basically that's all there is to it. So if you have any questions, then let me know. But besides for that, we're all done here. Thanks.